Hi, I'm Grant Miller, founder and CEO of Replicated. So I'm going to give you a quick demo and tour of our latest product that we call KOTS. So that stands for Kubernetes Off-The-Shelf software. Just like commercial off-the-shelf software, except kind of for the Kubernetes age. So what's really cool about KOTS is that, one, it has an open source core. So you can go to kots.io and kind of learn about the open source KOTS CLI, which is a kubectl command. You can learn about the admin console, which gets installed inside the cluster and sort of manages the application. And you can learn about the vendor portal, which is the vendor tooling in order to package a Kubernetes application for enterprise installation as a modern on-prem app. So what we're going to do here is I have a couple of different environments set up. So first, behind the scenes here, I'm actually installing this application called Sentry Pro, which is just a pro version of the open source Sentry product, into a plain vanilla Linux VM. So this is an Ubuntu VM, and I ran this install script on it about a minute or two ago. And so this is just going to install Kubernetes and then install the KOTS ADM admin console and then get ready to actually install the application. So one of the great things about the new KOTS platform with Replicated is that not only can it embed this sort of Kubernetes with an application and kind of create this multi-node cluster, but it also can do an existing cluster install. And so the way that we do an existing cluster install is you generally give your end customer a command to run. So they would run this command, this curl KOTS command on their workstation. So let's do that over here. And this is going to download the latest version of KOTS and install it as a kubectl plugin. So if anyone has a Kubernetes cluster, an existing cluster, they probably have kubectl somewhere, either on their workstation or in some type of system that they use to apply changes. So we decided to sort of make this existing cluster installation process as Kubernetes native as possible. So that's why we're using kubectl plugins. So now the next part is just run kubectl KOTS install Sentry Pro. So this is just the application name. So if it was a different app, it would just be that name. Great. So it prompts me then to create a namespace. So we'll do Sentry Pro. And then it starts to deploy the application and get things ready. So while this is happening, I'll sort of just walk you a little around the Replicated vendor portal. So this is basically the same tooling that we've had for a long time. Release channels, customer licenses, troubleshooting capabilities, and one thing you'll notice here is this new Kubernetes installer. This Kubernetes installer is basically a YAML description of the Kubernetes distro that we want to have installed with my embedded cluster. So in this case, it's totally upstream, based on kubeadm. So we can get the latest version of kubeadm. We also package with it by default Weave, Rook, Contour, a Docker registry, our KOTS ADM admin console, Prometheus, and then Docker. So we'll give you a specific Docker version. And you can specify and you can pin these if you'd like. But this becomes the installer that your customers then install your application on top of. Okay, so while that's happening, other thing I would do here, if I'm an end customer, I would have gotten a license from the vendor. So this is, imagine I'm the hot crypto co. I was given this license. I have been given some air gap capabilities if I want. I'm a paid customer. I'm on the stable channel. My license expires, in 2020. So we'll flip back over to our consoles to see how it's going. Okay, so this the existing cluster install is asking me if I would like to put a password on, which I will. Great. So that's going to finish up that deployment. And it looks like our embedded cluster install is still working behind the scenes. Installing Kubernetes is not necessarily the fastest thing in the world to do. So I think maybe GKE does it in 4 minutes, and I think EKS might do it in 15. So I think our 5-minute installer is not too bad. Okay, so while we're waiting, it looks like this is actually ready. So what it's asking me to do is go to localhost port 8800. So localhost is interesting. Our Kubernetes cluster doesn't actually have any public IPs. So how would we access it? Well, what we've decided to do is actually do a port forward through localhost. So we're going to route your traffic through your localhost to this cluster. So now you're viewing what we call KOTS ADM admin console. So it's asking you to upload a license. So I mentioned I would have a license to upload right now. I'll upload this license. And then because this license was air gap enabled, it actually gives me the option to provide my internal registry. So maybe I'm running Artifactory or Harbor or something internally, and I would want my images to be pushed there so that I can scan them and do other things with them. And then I would drag the full air gap bundle to this location, and it would prepare those images. I would retag those, would push those to the registry, and then would rewrite my Kubernetes manifests with the new image locations. I'm just going to, install this from the internet because my nodes actually have internet access, so it's not going to be a problem. All right, so what this is going to do is going to reach out to Replicated and take that license file and try to find what application it can install. So it knows, okay, it's going to be Sentry, and it's asking me for some configuration options. So I'm going to put in sentry.somebigbank.com. And I'll just go with the defaults for everything else. So then it pops me into these pre-flight checks. We only have one pre-flight check here. We could have a lot more. This is a way to just validate that the Kubernetes environment you're installing into actually meets all of the application requirements. We'll continue right through. Great. So because I applied those configuration options, looks like I have done my installation. So this is actually deployed. We can check for updates at any time, see if there's a new version available. Looks like there isn't. I'll point out a couple other key features. Actually, we're still waiting here. I'll point out a couple other key features that I think are really interesting. The first is GitOps. So at Replicated, we really believe in giving your end customer the ability to sort of meet whatever deployment requirements they have. So we think that GitOps is a great way for organizations to operationalize the deployment of internal applications, what we call first-party apps. So what we're doing with Replicated KOTS is we're enabling these enterprises to actually leverage the existing first-party deployment pipelines they have by augmenting it with third-party applications. So we can actually take, anytime this Sentry Pro application would update, instead of like coming to some admin dashboard and clicking update in order for that update to apply, we can actually get a Git commit. And we can support all these different Git providers. So we could go to GitLab, put it into this repo, and then continue with our deployment action. So pretty soon we'll actually have this to automatically create pull or merge requests. That's not a core Git feature, so that'll only be available in some of the higher level platforms that actually support that. And then I can decide, okay, do I want this to be customized based YAML, so apply-k, or just full normal Kubernetes manifest for apply-f. I'm a -k, so that's generally what I would do. Now, obviously, I didn't set this up correctly, so I'm not going to save that. We're going to go back to my dashboard here, where I can see that there is, some options to configure graphs. So Replicated supports Prometheus, and I could put a Prometheus endpoint in and start to show some of those graphs. I could also Replicated has a pretty detailed integration with Kustomize. So if I want, I can actually do a customization to do last mile configuration of this cluster. So by default, we have no customizations in here. But if I want to download these files, make some edits, and make some customizations on my workstation, and then push these back up, we would see that as an update. Great. So the other piece that's really important here is we always have this new troubleshoot feature embedded into the application. So the core Replicated, sort of classic Replicated, had the idea of support bundle gathering. Now we can do support bundle gathering and analysis. So this will be all analyzed on the cluster, which we think is really important. Cool. So while we're flipping here on the existing cluster, let's toss back over to the embedded cluster. Okay, so it looks like this has completed the installation of Kubernetes. So it's telling me to access this IP address on port 8800, which I'm going to do. So this is this was just a vanilla Kubernetes, and there's a password here. I'm going to just go ahead and use this. This was just a vanilla Ubuntu box. And so now it's telling me, okay, there's going to be some kind of browser warning because we use a bootstrap this machine with a TLS cert that's self-signed. So I'll click continue setup. Click advanced and click proceed. If I wanted to, I could upload my own certs and keys. I'll just skip and continue and keep going. So it's not secure, but I'm not afraid of it. I'll put that password in that I just pulled out, and then I'll drop that license in. You'll notice that this experience is exactly the same as what we just did for an existing cluster. So, again, I have the option for air gap. Now, in this case, we actually package up a registry with the cluster, so we don't need to expose an external registry. We can just drop the air gap package in, and we'll unbundle everything. Again, I'm just going to download it from the internet. So it's going to use that license key and pull those images down, either from public sources or from proxied registries that Replicated can access that have been given by the customer. So next part here is I'll put that same host name in. Maybe I'll do century2.somebigbank.com. I'll save this. Runs those pre-flight checks again. Okay, so my Kubernetes version matched the pre-flight checks this time. It's because we installed a newer version. I think it's actually 1.15. We'll click continue and keep going through here. So one thing you'll notice is we have, there we go, this as deployed. So we've deployed the application. Again, we can check for updates. You'll notice the exact same, GitOps configuration options, same dashboard. We do have some embedded graphs that show up by default, so no need for us to hook in Prometheus because we already packaged in with the application. But one thing we have here too, because this is an embedded cluster, is cluster management. So we can actually add additional nodes. So I could run this command on an additional node and it would register here. So I could add in multiple nodes. We do have master support. We just haven't released it yet, so that'll come out in the next few weeks. But this is a fully, sort of embedded cluster option, the exact same experience for an existing cluster, all managed by a single vendor portal. So that is really cross-functional between your entire team. So your sales team, your support team, your customer success team can all be here, engaged and in having different roles and being able to do different things with the application and with your customers. So that's a really quick overview of Replicated KOTS. Not that quick, but hopefully quick enough. Thanks so much.